The morning he changed the locks, I was standing in the driveway with a single cardboard box and a garbage bag of winter clothes, watching my own reflection disappear in the front window of the house I grew up in. It was 7:14 in the morning. I know the exact time because I had been checking my watch every few minutes since Logan called me at 6, his voice flat and unbothered, the way someone sounds when they've already made a decision and just need you to know about it. "Come get your stuff," he said. "I need you out by 8. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "Logan, it's our parents' house." And he said, "Not anymore." He hung up before I could answer. "My name is Madison Donovan. I'm 34 years old. I'm a licensed contractor with 11 years of experience in renovation and restoration, a woman who has spent her career rebuilding things that other people gave up on. I've rewired houses with faulty foundations. I've restored plumbing in structures that hadn't had running water in decades. I know what it looks like when something that should hold together has been quietly falling apart for years. I had been watching my family fall apart for a very long time. I just hadn't expected the collapse to come at 7 in the morning with a key that no longer fit my lock. Let me take you back. Not far. Just far enough to understand how we got here. Our parents, Jean and Patrice Donovan, passed away 14 months apart. Dad first, a stroke in the garden, quiet and fast, the way he would have wanted. Then Mom, who never really recovered from losing him, slipped away in the spring of the following year. The house was theirs. A 4-bedroom colonial in Millbrook, Massachusetts, the kind of house with original oak floors and a wraparound porch that creak in that particular, comforting way. They had bought it in 1989, paid it off in 2011, and poured 30 years of themselves into every wall. When they died, they left no will. That was the first crack in the foundation. I should have known that was a problem. I did know. But grief has a way of making you focus on the immediate, on the casseroles and the phone calls and the boxes of photographs, rather than the long-term architecture of what's being left behind. Logan and I were the only heirs. Logan was 38. He had never held a job for longer than 2 years. He had been between positions, his phrase, always so diplomatic, for 8 months before Mom died. He had moved back into the house when she got sick, and I had moved in a few months later to help with her care. We were living together again for the first time since we were teenagers, and it was not comfortable, but it was manageable. Until it wasn't. After Mom passed, something shifted in Logan. He had always been the kind of person who takes up space, loud at the dinner table, dominant in conversation, the type who fills a room with his presence and makes you feel like you're sitting in a corner even when you're standing right next to him. But something about being in that house, sleeping in his old bedroom, sitting at the head of what used to be our father's table, it did something to him. He started to believe it was his. Not ours. His. The small signs came first. He stopped asking me when he was having friends over and started telling me. He rearranged the living room without mentioning it. He threw out Mom's African violets because he said they were cluttering the windowsill. I bit my tongue each time. I told myself we were both grieving. I told myself that people process loss in strange ways. But then came the conversation in November. I had been contacted by a real estate attorney, a woman named Carla Pierce, who had been working with our family for years and who had tracked me down after hearing that our parents had passed without a will. She explained what I already knew. The house would pass through intestate succession to both Logan and me equally. It was jointly owned property. We were co-heirs. I told Logan that evening. I laid it out clearly and calmly. I said we had options. We could sell and split the proceeds. One of us could buy out the other, or we could both continue living there and make decisions jointly about the property going forward. Logan looked at me across the kitchen table where we had eaten cereal as children, where Mom had helped us with homework, where Dad had read the newspaper every Sunday morning without fail. "I'm not splitting anything," Logan said. "I was here when they died. You weren't." That landed like a blade. I had been here. I had driven 4 hours every weekend for the last year of Mom's life. I had installed the stair railing so she wouldn't fall. I had been the one to navigate the insurance paperwork and coordinate with her doctors and sit with her through the nights when she was afraid. But I had kept my apartment in Providence because I had clients, because I had a business, because I had a life that couldn't simply be paused. "Logan," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I was here." "Not enough," he said. And he stood up and walked out of the kitchen. I didn't say anything else that night. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, listening to the house settle, and I thought about our parents. I thought about what they would have wanted, and I thought about the fact that Logan had just declared, very quietly, that a war was starting. I did not want a war. I have never wanted a war, but I have always been very good at winning them. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in hostile architecture. Every day that I lived in that house with Logan, I watched him lay bricks. He was building something, not a home but a claim. A fortress made of assumption and entitlement and the mistaken belief that the person who speaks loudest gets to decide what's true. He started inviting people over and introducing them to the house as his place. He began referring to decisions about the property in the first-person singular. I caught him on the phone with someone, a friend, I think, saying, "I'm thinking about converting the back bedroom into a gym." The back bedroom. My bedroom. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Confrontation, I have learned over 11 years of working in construction, is almost never the right first move. When you discover a structural flaw in a building, you don't start swinging a hammer. You get your measurements right. You document everything. You build your case before you build anything else. So I documented every conversation we had about the house. I wrote down in a small notebook I kept in the inside pocket of my work jacket. Not obsessively, just clearly. Dates, times, what was said. I kept my own copies of every legal document I could find in the house. Birth certificates, property tax records, the original deed. I photographed them on my phone and uploaded them to a cloud storage account. I also called Carla Pierce. Quietly, carefully, without telling Logan. Carla walked me through the intestate succession process in Massachusetts. She confirmed what I already knew. The house was equally mine. There was no question of that. The question was what we were going to do about it. She advised me to get a formal appraisal, to document my contributions to the property, particularly the renovation work I had done, and to begin the process of establishing what my legal rights were before Logan could do anything irreversible. I had the appraisal done while Logan was out of town visiting a friend. The property came in at $740,000. Clean title. No liens. No complications. Half of $740,000 is $370,000. I want you to keep that number in mind. In early December, Logan came to me with a proposal. He sat across from me in the living room, on the couch I had reupholstered 2 years ago when Mom's back started aching, the one I had carried up the stairs by myself because Logan was busy, and he said he wanted to buy me out. "Okay," I said carefully. "What are you offering?" He named a number. $80,000. I kept my face perfectly still. "The house is appraised at $740," I said. "My half is $370. The appraisal doesn't account for the mortgage," Logan said. "There is no mortgage," I said. "Mom and Dad paid it off." He shifted in his seat. "There are carrying costs, maintenance, utilities. I've been paying all of that. I paid utilities while I lived here," I said. "I also installed the new HVAC system, the railing on the stairs, the updated electrical in the kitchen, and the drainage fix in the basement. That's about $40,000 in labor and materials at cost. If we're talking about contributions, Logan, the ledger is not in your favor." The look on his face shifted then. Not to shame, to something colder, to calculation. "You need to be reasonable," he said. "I am being completely reasonable," I replied. "I'm using math." He stood up and left the room without saying anything else. 2 days later, a locksmith came while I was at a job site. When I came home, my key didn't work. My belongings were in the driveway in boxes. That is the moment I described at the beginning of the story, standing in my own driveway, watching my reflection fade from the window of the house where I learned to ride a bike and burn my first batch of Christmas cookies and held my mother's hand while she died. The difference between me and the person Logan expected me to be is this: I did not break. I did not call him in a rage. I did not throw anything against the side of the house. I picked up my cardboard box and my garbage bag of winter clothes. I put them in my truck, and I drove to a motel 6 miles away where I paid cash for 3 nights and laid on the stiff bed and stared at the water-stained ceiling. Then I opened my phone and called Carla Pierce. "He changed the locks," I said. There was a pause on her end. Then, "Okay, Madison, he just made this significantly easier for us." The motel room smelled like industrial cleaner and old carpet. There was a heating unit under the window that rattled when it cycled on, and a television bolted to the dresser that I never turned on. I spent 3 days in that room working. I called Carla every morning. I pulled up every document I had stored in the cloud. I made lists of my contributions to the property, of the specific conversations I had documented, of the timeline of events since our parents' deaths. I was not panicking. I was planning. There is a particular kind of clarity that comes when someone takes everything from you. When there is nothing left to protect, nothing left to be careful with, you stop hedging. You stop managing. You see the situation for exactly what it is, and you see it in full. What Logan had done, Carla told me, was legally extraordinary in its stupidity. By changing the locks on a property that I co-owned, under intestate succession, which was documented and clear, he had committed what is known as unlawful ouster. In plain terms, he had illegally excluded a co-owner from property that was legally hers. It's not a gray area. It is a clear violation of property law. We could file for a petition action, a formal legal process in which the court steps in to divide jointly held property when the co-owners cannot agree. In a petition action, the court can order the property sold and the proceeds divided equally. Given that Logan's offer to buy me out was less than 22 cents on the dollar of my actual legal share, we had significant grounds for action. But before we filed, Carla said we needed to do 2 things. First, formally document the unlawful ouster with law enforcement. Second, send a formal demand letter giving Logan 30 days to restore my access or face legal proceedings. I want to be clear, Carla said. You are not doing this to punish him. You're doing this because this is what the law requires and protects. What happens after that is up to him. I know, I said. But what happens after that? If he doesn't comply, she said, we go to court. And given the appraisal, the documented contributions, and the unlawful ouster, Madison, I am confident in this case. I hung up and lay back on the stiff motel bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought about Logan at the dinner table, telling me what I didn't deserve. I thought about my mother's African violets in the trash. I thought about 37 boxes of my father's books that I had organized and cataloged and donated because Logan couldn't be bothered. I thought about the railing on the staircase that I had installed with my own hands, the one my mother had gripped every morning for the last year of her life. I was not angry. I was past angry. I was in that cold, clear place that comes when you understand exactly how a structure has failed and exactly how to rebuild it correctly. I got up, washed my face, and called the non-emergency line for the Millbrook Police Department. Officer Renata Vasquez had been with the Millbrook PD for 9 years. She was compact and serious, with the manner of someone who has heard every version of every story and requires only the facts. She came to the motel at my request the following morning, and I laid everything out for her on the small table by the window, the photographs of the driveway, the documents on my phone, the property records, the timeline. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked 2 questions. You are a 50% co-owner of the property at 14 Harrow Lane? Yes. Your access was revoked by the other co-owner without legal authority to do so? Yes. She made notes. She asked if there were any domestic violence concerns, any safety issues that might complicate a welfare check. I said no. She closed her notebook. Miss Donovan, she said, I'd like to accompany you to the property. If the situation is as you've described, I may be able to facilitate access while the legal process moves forward. We drove in separate vehicles. I followed Officer Vasquez's cruiser through Millbrook's quiet morning streets, past the coffee shop where I used to stop with my mother, past the hardware store where my father had an account for 30 years, through the leafy, familiar roads of the neighborhood I had grown up in. We pulled into the driveway of 14 Harrow Lane at 9:47 on a Tuesday morning. The house looked exactly the same as always. The porch swing was moving slightly in the November wind. The oak in the front yard had dropped most of its leaves. The curtain in the front window shifted as we pulled in. Officer Vasquez knocked. 3 clear knocks. Official. Unhurried. There was a pause. Then footsteps. Then the door opened, and Logan stood there in sweatpants and a college t-shirt, hair uncombed, a coffee mug in his hand. He was already smiling, the particular smile people put on when they see a police officer and assume they're in the clear. The smile faltered when he saw me behind her. "Good morning," Officer Vasquez said. "Are you Logan Donovan?" "Yeah," he said slowly. "Is there a problem?" "I'm following up on a report regarding property access at this address," she said. "Is it correct that you changed the locks on this property on November 14th? Logan's eyes cut to me. I said nothing. I kept my face completely still. "Yeah," he said. "This is my house. I can change the locks if I want." "Can I ask," Officer Vasquez said, "are you the sole owner of the property?" A beat of silence. We're working through the estate. It's complicated." "I see." She nodded, consulting her notes. "According to the probate records for Jean and Patrice Donovan, this property passed through intestate succession equally to you and your sister, Madison Donovan. Is that your understanding?" Logan's jaw tightened. "Like I said, it's complicated." "Mr. Donovan," Officer Vasquez said, and her voice did not harden, but it settled into something final, the way concrete sets. "Your sister is a 50% co-owner of this property. You do not have the legal authority to deny her access. I'm asking you to either restore her key access now, or to understand that this will be documented as an unlawful ouster and referred to the appropriate authorities for follow-up." The coffee mug was very still in Logan's hand. She's doing this to harass me," he said, but the confidence was already draining from his voice, like water finding a lower level. "She doesn't even want the house. She just wants to cause problems." "Mr. Donovan," Officer Vasquez said, "I need a yes or no. Will you restore access to your co-owner?" He looked at me. I had not said a single word. I thought about the African violets. I thought about my key that didn't work. I thought about the cardboard box in the back of my truck. I looked back at him calmly and I waited. "Fine," he said at last, the word coming out like something bitten off. "Fine. I'll get her a key." He disappeared inside. Officer Vasquez turned to look at me briefly, and there was something in her expression, not sympathy exactly, but recognition. The look of someone who has seen this particular architectural failure before and knows how it ends. Logan came back with a brass key. He held it out to me. I took it without thanking him. Here is what Logan did not know while he was changing locks and moving my boxes into the driveway. While I had been living in that house, for the 14 months between my mother's death and the morning of the boxes, I had been quietly, methodically, professionally doing what I do. I had installed the new HVAC system in March. I had replaced the galvanized plumbing in the basement bathroom in May because the pipes were so corroded they were actively leaking into the foundation. I had refinished the hardwood floors on the second level in July because years of foot traffic and a slow roof leak that Dad had never quite gotten around to fixing had left them warped and damaged. I had rebuilt the back porch steps in September because one of them had cracked through and my mother had nearly fallen. None of this was done casually. None of it was done off the books. Every single project was documented. Materials receipts. Labor invoices. Because even when you're the one swinging the hammer, work has a value, and I had learned long ago to document mine. Photographs, before, during, and after. Permits pulled properly through the Millbrook Building Department, every one of them associated with the property address and now part of public record. The total value of documented work, $67,400. At market rate for a licensed contractor, not family discount rate, not material cost only, but what I would have charged any client for equivalent labor, closer to $90,000. I presented these documents to Carla Pierce on a Wednesday afternoon in her office, which smelled of good coffee and paper, the particular smell of someone who takes their work seriously. She went through them methodically, without speaking. When she reached the last page, she set them down and looked at me over her glasses. "You've been planning this," she said. "I've been protecting myself," I said. "I didn't know I'd need to. But I've always documented my work. It's just how I operate." She was quiet for a moment. "Logan is going to have a very bad time in court." The petition action was filed 12 days later. Logan was served on a Thursday morning. Carla told me later that he called her office 4 times that day. She did not take his calls. Part 6. What he didn't expect. The interesting thing about people who believe they are entitled to what they haven't earned is that they are almost always catastrophically underprepared for the moment when accountability arrives. Logan called me 3 hours after being served. The call came from a number I recognized, our old landline, still somehow connected, still somehow charged. I stared at the name on my screen for a long moment. I answered, "You're suing me?" His voice was loud. Not quite a shout, but close. The voice of someone whose volume has always worked before and who doesn't understand why it isn't working now. "You're actually suing me over Mom and Dad's house?" "I filed a partition action," I said. "Which is not a lawsuit, exactly. It's a legal mechanism for resolving a property dispute between co-owners." "Don't do that," he said. "Don't be like that. Don't talk to me like you're my lawyer. I'm not your lawyer, Logan. I'm your co-owner who you locked out of her own property." A pause, heavy and strange. "I was going to work it out," he said, and his voice had shifted, not to softness exactly, but to something more careful. Tactical. He was trying to find the right angle. "I was just trying to get some space to figure things out. I didn't think you'd go nuclear." "I sent you a demand letter," I said. "You didn't respond." "I exercised my legal rights." "Madison." His voice dropped. This was the Logan I remembered from childhood, the one who, when he couldn't win by force, would switch to something quieter. More intimate. More manipulative. "We're family." "Yes," I said. "We are." I let that sit for a moment. "And family," I continued, "does not lock family out of their inherited home at 7 in the morning with a cardboard box and a garbage bag." He said nothing. "Family," I said, "does not offer someone 22 cents on the dollar for their legal share of a $740,000 property." Still nothing. "Family," I said, "does not throw away their mother's African violets." I heard his breath catch. For just a moment, and it passed quickly, but I caught it. I heard something real under all the calculation. Something like grief. Something like shame. But it passed. "So what do you want?" he said, and his voice was flat again. The shutters backed down. "I want what is legally mine," I said. "Exactly that. Nothing more, nothing less. And if I offer you more than 80, the partition action has been filed," I said. "You can speak to your attorney." I ended the call. I sat in the parking lot of a grocery store for a moment, and I breathed in through my nose and out through my mouth. Slow and deliberate, the way you breathe when you're bracing a structure and you need your hands to be completely steady. I was not triumphant. What I felt was quieter, more architectural. I felt the weight redistributing correctly. I felt the structure holding. The partition hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in January, 6 weeks after the filing. Millbrook County Courthouse, a building I had driven past my entire life without ever imagining I would sit inside it, arguing over my mother's kitchen floors. Logan arrived with his attorney, a man named Garrett Hull who had a thick red file folder and the manner of someone who has taken bad cases before and knows they have bad cases. I watched Logan across the courtroom. He was wearing a suit I didn't recognize, dark gray, and he had combed his hair. He looked like a version of himself that he'd put on for the occasion. Like a costume. He didn't look at me. Carla presented the case cleanly and precisely. The intestate succession, the legal co-ownership, the unlawful ouster, the documented contributions to the property, the appraisal. She laid each piece down like she was building something. Which she was. Logan's attorney argued that the property had been Logan's primary residence for longer, that Logan had been the primary caregiver at the end of our parents' lives, a claim that made me grip the edge of the table so hard my knuckles went white, and that my contributions to the property, while acknowledged, could be disputed in terms of their value. The judge, Honorable Cassandra Whitmore, a woman with close-cropped silver hair and the specific expression of someone who has sat through a great many of these proceedings, leaned forward slightly when Logan's attorney made the caregiver argument. "Counselor," she said, "do you have documentation of the care provided by your client?" Garrett Hull shuffled his papers. "Your Honor, the nature of caregiving is—" "Documentation," she repeated. "Medical records, care logs, communications with healthcare providers. Do you have them?" He did not. I had them. I had the documentation of every doctor's appointment I had driven my mother to. The pharmacy records. The notes from her palliative care nurse, who I had coordinated with directly, and who had provided a written statement at Carla's request. The texts between me and my mother in the last months of her life, recovered from her old phone, printed out in a stack 4 inches thick. Garrett Hull sat down. Carla laid it all on the table. Judge Whitmore reviewed the documentation with the unhurried focus of someone who has no personal stake in this and is therefore free to see it clearly. It took most of the morning. At 12:47 p.m., she ruled. The property would be subject to partition. Logan had 60 days to purchase Madison Donovan's share at fair market value, $370,000, or the court would order the property listed for sale and the proceeds divided equally. She also noted, for the record, that the unlawful ouster was documented and could be referred to the district attorney's office if the affected party chose to pursue it further. Logan's face went through 4 distinct expressions in about 6 seconds. I watched them pass like weather. I looked at the papers on the table in front of me. I did not look at him. Logan did not have $370,000. That was the simple truth underneath everything else. He had been living on the assumption that he could force a settlement, that I would take a fraction of what was mine just to make it stop, that the weight of the legal process would be more than I could carry. He did not know me as well as he thought he did. 41 days after the ruling, the house at 14 Harrow Lane was listed with a local real estate firm. The listing photographs showed the oak floors I had refinished, the back porch steps I had rebuilt, the basement bathroom with the new plumbing, the HVAC that ran quietly and efficiently, the staircase railing that I had installed with my own hands because my mother needed it to be there. The house sold in 18 days, slightly above asking, $762,000. After fees and costs, the net proceeds were split down the middle. Carla sent me the wire transfer confirmation on a Thursday afternoon while I was on a job site, my hands in work gloves, my knees on someone else's floor. I sat back on my heels in the cold, empty room and read the number on my phone screen. I thought about my mother. I thought about the specific weight of her hand in mine in the last weeks of her life, papery and warm and familiar in the way that only the hands of people who have held you your whole life can be familiar. I thought about how she used to call me when she was worried about Logan. Not often, and never in explicit terms, but I had always heard what she meant underneath what she said. I think she trusted me to handle it. I think that is why she used to look at me with that particular expression. Not pity, not apology, but something more like trust. Like, I know you will be okay. I was okay. I stood up, brushed the dust off my knees, and went back to work. Logan and I have not spoken since the hearing. I do not know where he is living. I have heard, through the particular grapevine of a small town, that he has rented an apartment on the other side of Millbrook. I have heard that he has a new job, something in sales, which seems right for someone who spent so much of his life trying to sell people a version of events that wasn't quite true. I do not wish him harm. I want to be clear about that because it is true, and because the stories we tell about moments like this so often require a hero who burns with righteous fury, and that is not who I am. I am someone who knows how to assess structural damage and make decisions about what can be salvaged and what needs to be torn down. The relationship between Logan and me was damaged long before the boxes in the driveway. It was damaged in 100 small ways, over years, in every moment that he spoke over me at the dinner table, in every assumption that his needs were the ones that mattered, in every time he leaned on our parents, and let me be the one to hold things together while he collected the credit. The boxes were not the damage. They were just the moment when the damage became undeniable. What I salvaged from all of it is harder to define. I salvaged my mother's recipe box, which Logan had not touched. I salvaged a box of my father's books, the ones I had cataloged and organized and was going to donate, and then at the last moment put in my truck instead, because they were his and I wanted them. I salvaged a framed photograph of the 4 of us from a camping trip in 1996. Mom and Dad and Logan and me, all standing in front of a rented canoe, squinting into the summer sun. I did not salvage the house. The house is someone else's now, a young couple with a toddler and another baby on the way. I hope they understand what they have. I hope they feel the particular weight of those original oak floors. I hope they take care of the railing on the stairs. It is 9 months since the morning I stood in the driveway with my cardboard box. I am writing this from a house I rented in the interim, a small Cape Cod with a leaking roof that I am slowly fixing, because this is what I do, because I cannot live in a structure with a problem and not address the problem, and I am thinking about locks. The thing about a lock is that it is a symbol that almost always means less than people think it does. Logan changed the locks on a house he did not fully own, and he thought that ended the conversation. He thought that if he could control the physical fact of my access, he could control everything else. The legal reality, the documented truth, the balance of what was owed and what was mine. What he did not understand is that a lock is just hardware. It can be documented. It can be presented as evidence. It can be the detail that an officer mentions on a doorstep on a Tuesday morning, the thing that makes a person's legal position suddenly very clear to everyone in the room. He changed the lock to keep me out. He changed the lock to tell me that what was mine was not mine, that my work and my presence and my grief and my care did not count, that he was the one who got to decide the story. But the thing about me, the thing Logan never fully understood, possibly because he was never watching carefully enough to see it, is that I have always been very good at working with the materials I'm given. You give me a broken foundation, I'll show you how to pour a new footing. You give me a structure that's been badly maintained for years, I'll show you exactly what it needs. You give me a lock that doesn't work, I'll document it, call an attorney, involve law enforcement, file a petition action, win in court, and sell the house at above asking price. I am a licensed contractor. I have spent 11 years rebuilding things that other people gave up on. You should not lock me out of anything and assume I won't find a way back in. There is a photograph on my desk, not the camping trip, a different one. It's just my mother, taken maybe 2 years before she died, sitting at the kitchen table at 14, Harrow Lane with a cup of tea and the Saturday crossword. She is not looking at the camera. She is looking at the puzzle, her pen tapping against her lip, thinking. She is wearing a blue sweater I recognize, and there is morning light coming through the window behind her, catching the steam from the tea, and she looks peaceful. Exactly where she belongs. Exactly herself. I took that photograph. I developed it at a lab in Providence and framed it, and it has been on my desk ever since. I think about her when things are hard. I think about what she taught me, which she never taught me in any explicit or conscious way. She just modeled it, just lived it in front of me without commentary. She taught me that you can be soft and still be immovable, that you can be quiet and still be the loudest thing in the room, that the people who make the most noise are very often the people with the least solid ground to stand on. She taught me, without ever saying so, that the structure of a person, their integrity, their patience, their willingness to do the work and document it and stand behind it, matters more than the volume of their voice. Logan chose volume. He chose the lock and the boxes, and the bad offer and the bluster and the suit at the hearing and the attorney with the red folder and the arguments that fell apart as soon as anyone looked at them carefully. I chose documentation. I chose my work. I chose my evidence. I chose to trust the structure of the law, which is imperfect and slow and sometimes infuriating, but which, in this case, worked exactly the way it was supposed to work. The house sold. The money was transferred. The morning I received the wire confirmation, I drove to the lot on the edge of town where they sell garden supplies and flowering plants, and I bought 3 African violets. I put them in the window of my rented Cape Cod. They are blooming now, purple and steady in the November light. Every morning I walk past them and they are there, and that is enough. That is more than enough. My mother would have liked that. And if you are out there, in your own driveway, with your own cardboard box, looking at a lock that should not be locked, I want you to know this. Document everything. Trust the structure. Do not let anyone tell you that what is legally, rightfully, documentably yours does not belong to you. Do the work. Keep the receipts. And let the law knock on the door.